to our Leaders Like Us campaign of interviews with our mentors as part of the overall vision for our development program. This is a great opportunity to share their corporate career stories, tips and hints with all our mentees and young people across the country. We'd like to help young people of all backgrounds feel inspired to succeed, gain insights and access to a diverse set of corporate leaders that they feel they can relate to. Sabri Salman, MD for Global Corporates in Barclays, is one of our charity's mentors. And here he tells us about his career tips. He's an authentic role model who advocates a pragmatic, flexible and inclusive approach to solving business problems, while taking on life and career opportunities as an adventure with a sense of curiosity and humility. Sabri, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this Leaders Like Us interview. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Adam. Really delighted to be here, and thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Sabri, as one of our charity's mentors, we are very grateful for your input. And one of my observations is that as a managing director in Barclays, you're pretty young and have had an illustrious career. What has your secret been in accelerating your career?
So I think firstly, I don't consider myself young anymore. I think I've enjoyed that ride for a while now. I'm getting to a stage where I've definitely reached the other side, particularly when I see the millennials and the tech-savvy individuals come through. It's a nice thing to look back and reflect what's brought you so far in your journey. And for me, I think I've not lost my curiosity, both commercially. Whenever I see a client or whenever I read about something, I always wonder what's the commercial model underlying. How does commerce happen? Who is the customer and who are they interacting with? I still have that commercial curiosity, so that keeps me energized. And secondly, it's about being curious about people as well. I don't consider myself super smart, but I do have two levers that I constantly pull in my business world. One is stay close to your customers and stay close to your colleagues / talent. And that takes both commercial curiosity and human curiosity. So I think that's what's kept me energized throughout my career.
And I think one of the experiences that you've had in your life and your career is that you moved from Sri Lanka to the UK. What was that life journey like, to move from one country to another and from one continent and culture to another?
I think it's a mix of emotions, really. I certainly remember every time I've made a move internationally, and I've done a few since my first move from Sri Lanka to England, there's a sense of excitement. And then there's a sense of dread. And I think you should feel both, because that stage fright, as they say, really makes you think harder, plan better, and take all the risks into account. But that sense of enthusiasm and excitement should be there also, just to tackle any of the sort of issues that you come across. It's not been easy. And the first step to making a move internationally, whether it's Sri Lanka to England or those living in England to another country, is to accept that things will be different. And to shed the sense of entitlement. I think that is what many people suffer from in this day and age, is that sense of entitlement and that sense that life is fair. Okay, it's a controversial thing to say, but I don't believe life is fair. Life is unfair inherently. You have to make it right. And that sense of entitlement has to be completely taken away from your sort of psyche. You have to work hard, you have to work smart, and even then things might not turn out the way you planned, but it might turn out differently or better even. So that's kind of how I treat life even now.
That's a very, very balanced way of looking at it. And one of the things that I consider you, Sabri, is someone very authentic. I have always found that whilst you're very authentic in your origins and in your character, values and beliefs, you are quite flexible in your thinking and in your style, and you have absolute respect for a diverse set of people. What would your advice be to our young mentees who are very diverse in terms of how to keep their authenticity and origins, but at the same time be able to live with and work with wide variety of people?
It's one of my favorite questions, and I'm not very articulate in bringing all my thinking here, but let me give it a stab. I think the first thing to do is seek diversity. I see my fellow countrymen from Sri Lanka who have moved across to UK, and then a few years later down the line, I look at their social circles and their weekends, and it happens to be all Sri Lankans. And it frustrates me incredibly because, you've left a country and you've embraced another, but you haven't made an effort to open up your own thinking because you're in the same pool of people that you always knew. So you haven't taken the first step of creating diversity for yourself. And then the second point is that diversity has so many lenses that you can't just chase one lens of diversity all the time. I certainly think there's an issue with gender diversity and the imbalance, and that has to be addressed. So it's okay to champion it. But there are so many lenses, whether it's the LGBT agenda or people who have different types of experience, from international experience to the local experience. People who are lifers in a certain organization to people who are coming from outside. When you look around your team, you have to have enough people around that table with diverse experiences to tackle problems and to service your customers. People forget that diversity is all about doing the right thing. Sure, it is underlying. It is about correcting society, but it is also about solving problems and meeting the demands of the organization. And you've got to have both. And so for me, that is the second element of diversity. And then lastly, treat every opportunity when someone leaves your team or when you take a new role to look at it from a fresh perspective. Don't take the norm or the culture of the organization as an excuse. Be a bit bold in challenging the way things are done here. I think that's kind of my way of articulating how I've stayed authentic to myself, but also scientifically looked at my sort of diversity lens and challenged myself.
Absolutely. You touched on, Sabri, different strands of diversity, how ethnicity, gender, LGBT, disability, all of these strands of diversity are important. I know that you're very active in supporting and developing women, and you're very active in women's networks at Barclays. For an ethnic minority female, what would Barclays feel like today if a young person joined Barclays after graduating?
And obviously, being a managing director of a firm, you'd expect me to say great things about the firm I work for. But I think the track record of why I remained in the organization is a good sign that for somebody who's lived worked in Sri Lanka and now working here in head office in Barclays, I couldn't have achieved this without having an inclusive culture. I was amazed at my first interview 15 years ago how I was treated. That sort of initial interaction with the organization is very important. They were purely looking for the skills I would bring to the table rather than, the color of my skin or whether I'd worked in UK or not overseas. And then throughout, all of the opportunities that have come my way has been on merit. And I have championed that for my team in the last few years. So I'd love to invite people to experience that for themselves personally. Particularly for those, going back to my previous point, if you leave that entitlement piece away and you think about working hard and smart and solving problems for clients, I think the organization has a culture of rewarding those individuals. That's how Barclays is today.
And what a positive message for diverse talent in all categories, that it is based on merit and based on their personal values and their ability and willingness to work hard. So that's a very, very positive message indeed. Are there challenges in your career that you think of, really key challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
I think I'd answer that by saying the challenges we face today. I think that's the most relevant to me now. I think both the younger generation, myself, and those who have been working for a long period, both have similar challenges today. I have it in two strands. I think one is the technology revolution. Firstly, how do you use technology to solve problems, going back? But then how do I also reskill myself in being prepared for the workforce of the future? I really worry about not just myself, my entire team or my colleagues around me, if we're doing enough to be ready for the workforce of the future. And that's a big issue to tackle today. My second issue, of course, is about choices. There's too much of choice. It's a good thing, but it can be a bad thing. I think traditionally in banking, you did a great job, you worked hard, and then somebody tapped you on the shoulder and told you to do the next job. And you started your career as a banker, you ended it with the bank, being a banker, and that was great. I think for most people, there's at least two careers in their life left, and possibly even three. And there isn't this habit of tapping you on the shoulder and waiting for your boss to tell you what the next job is. You got to work hard in plotting that course for yourself. And there's the challenge. There's choice, and then the path isn't clear. So those are my two sort of points. One is, how do you grasp the technology and resource or reskill, retool yourself? The second is, how do you plot your own career for yourself?
Although my observation is that the first problem, being technology savvy, is our generation's problem, and having career leadership and taking initiative and not being entitled is the next generation's challenge.
Yes,
and
that's a good point.
If I had to generalize, and actually we have an upcoming conference for our charity's mentees, which we've titled Career Leadership. So that we really ingrain in them that only they can drive their careers. They can ultimately make those decisions, and then we'll give them the tools needed in order to do that. But they are in the driving seat.
I agree. And I'd like to add a point. I got an 11-year-old boy, as you know, and I think about his career or his life after, when he's mature. And what I do know is that youngsters, younger generation, are actually quite tech savvy, but they do fall in love with the technology they're working with, and they forget that it is just merely a tool to solve problems and enhance lives. And I'd encourage the younger generation who's better at tech to work harder in connecting that to the real world and saying, what problems am I going to be solving, or what lives am I going to make better?
Yes.
So therefore, if the younger generation works hard at introducing diversity, that would be people with experience in life who understand what problems are out there. So that's the kind of best combination.
Absolutely, because diversity is age related as well. And I have a 13-year-old daughter, as you know, and a 10-year-old son as well. And I'm always having similar conversations with them to say, look, whatever career you choose, you have to think, what value am I bringing to the value chain? The technology you are talking about, daughter or son, is only, in the instance of what you're talking about, is only a distribution channel. Yeah. What's your content? What value does it bring? And to your point, Sabri, what problem does it solve?
Agreed.
And I think that will always commercially hold true.
Spot on.
Although I would love to learn more from them. So I do listen to the young as well, and I've learned a lot from our charity's Mentees and Young Leaders panel, and it's been a fantastic experience for me as well. So that's fantastic messages and advice for our young people. And before we draw the interview to a close, are there any other potent tips and hints that you would have for our young people so that they are successful but also balanced and happy?
The happiness equation. I don't think we have ever, none of us have actually discovered the happiness equation. But I can certainly say there will be a fair amount of you who are probably frustrated that you don't know what you want to do with your life, career particularly. I think it's a good thing. So there are a number of parents I speak to who have youngsters from the age 14 above, and the parents worry more, of course, for them. And I say it's a good thing if you have no absolute clear pathway, because that will only make you hungry to explore the avenues in front of you. Mm-hmm. So if you're frustrated that you don't have clear line of sight, that's a good thing. Embrace it. And at the same time, explore what's out there before making that firm decision. And the second piece is the theme I've sort of tried to highlight throughout this interview, is stay hungry and stay curious. The best successes come from people who are truly passionate about the thing they want to do. If you lose passion, move on, do something else. So I hope that was articulated properly. But
it was indeed. Sabri, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for sharing your thinking and tips with our young people. And as always, I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.